do this. Hi, I'm Valarie. Good morning. So this talk, getting hired in an unfair world. You're going to learn some things about me because that's who I am. I'm an oversharer. This originally was for people like me who shifted careers later in life, and our resumes do not support giving us the awesome jobs we definitely were meant to fill. But also, if you're shifting within the same industry, perhaps from a purely technical role to a DevRel role, perhaps if you're going to management, whatever. Content warning, I am going to talk about some light cyber stalking because that's really how you get a job in these modern days. But yeah, so let's just jump in. Let's just do this. Okay, so I was a stay-at-home mom for 5 years after having done medical office management. You don't know soulless, miserable work until you're the jackass that has to call someone December 15th and say, hey, you owe us $5,000 for your medical procedure, Merry Christmas. I did not enjoy that role. I was a bouncer in college, and then I did close personal protection. You do not know soulless, awful work until you're someone's bodyguard and they ask you to come back to their hotel room to earn extra money, and you're like, you would not ask the dudes with the neck rolls that, why are you asking me? So being a stay-at-home mom was something I did out of love for my family, because the cost of daycare is prohibitive, and with a psych degree and that skill set, I couldn't make much money. I made it 5 years. My husband found me on a Tuesday at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, sobbing hysterically in the main closet with a bottle of wine. And he said, what's going on, honey? And I said, I really hate being a mom. He was like, yeah, I know, come here, honey. And so I did the coding boot camp at Georgia Tech. And that was neat because a week before the coding boot camp, I referred to my laptop as the magic box that holds Facebook. So the cool thing about spending 10 grand on a web development boot camp is figuring out halfway through that you hate web development. But I went to a speed networking event, and this dude started getting to know me a little bit. And he said, hey, have you ever heard of DevOps? I said, no, I have no idea what that is. And he said, cool, don't take this the wrong way. People in DevOps are weird, and I think you would love it. And I was like, well, that's fair. I've met me. Turns out he was right. And so I found myself at 30 years old, having been a stay-at-home mom, having finished a 6-month web development boot camp, all the JavaScript, you get some JavaScript and you get some JavaScript. Okay, wanting to get into DevOps. I don't know if y'all are familiar, but there's no such thing as a DevOps internship. There's no such thing as entry-level DevOps. And I did not know that, and I did not accept that as an answer. So I had to get real creative, and that's kind of how this talk was born. My own personal hustle kind of got me where I am now. I did end up using the things we're about to talk about to convince an Atlanta area company to create an internship for me. And so I was a DevOps intern for a couple weeks. I was supposed to be 10 weeks, but it was 4 before they hired me on permanently. I was with Airbus for 3 years, and then I transitioned to Salesforce, where I'm currently employed. And it's been an interesting 4 years. So, again, everything that I talk about doing in this talk is something I actually did, whether it's reasonable or not. And I hope it amuses you as much as my life has amused me. So let's talk about the worst resume I've ever seen in my life. So this was me when I tried to get the job at Salesforce. It's awful. Resumes are a waste of time and data and storage, and my sister's super artsy. She tried to make it pretty with some color, but I don't know why we went with pink. It tells you nothing about who I am as a person. It's awful. It's awful. Holy crap, I don't even know why they put junior in my job title and why I chose to honor that when I could have just removed that. Resumes are not the way you get a job. My spouse has been a software architect. He's been in the industry for 25 years. He is one of the few people that I know that can send out a resume and someone might actually see it. Until you're there, the bots are gonna kick it. I mean, any number of these words, no, why is that there? Yeah, the horrifically bad software used to screen candidates will kick your resume long before a human ever sees it. while it is important to have one just because every now and then you'll meet someone who's like, I'd like to see your resume, that's not how we get a job. So let's talk about actually getting hired. This did not get me anywhere, and I'm so ashamed, but sometimes I like to look at it and think about how far I've come. So let's talk about LinkedIn. I know a lot of people, and I've done this talk at the boot camp at Georgia Tech several times, and I love that feeling like a month or two later when I get LinkedIn messages saying, oh my God, I did what you said and now I have this job and I love it. I'm like, yes. So people fresh out of a boot camp, the number one mistake that we make with LinkedIn is applying for jobs via LinkedIn. It's awful. Again, you're gonna get so there's a few different ways that your application gets sent to the company. It's either filtered through LinkedIn software or not. Either way, it's crap. Don't do it. Just don't apply. So how do we get a job? There's two main ways I really like. The first is to say, okay, so let's say I want this role. That is the job I want. I'm qualified for maybe 35 to 40% of it. That's all you need. Do not ever think that you need to be 100% on. First of all, HR people write the recs, not people who actually do the job. And they will say things like, you must have 10 years experience in a technology that has existed for 3 years. And just ignore. If you meet like a third of the requirements, that's a good job. That's probably for you. So the first way to go about it is to say, okay, I want this role. Who do I know that works there? Because anyone you know who works there is going to be able to do one of two things. If they are an older school company and not so tech savvy, or still just doing things. I mean, it's 2022. Why do I have to speak to a human or have a piece of paper in my life? Why can't I do everything through an app at this point? But they can either hand deliver your resume to a hiring manager, or ideally, get you an internal referral link. Now, I have done judo for 26 years, and one of the sort of maxims of judo is mutual welfare and benefit. I don't believe in altruism. I think it's crap. My favorite kind of helping is where both parties benefit. So if you're asking someone, hey, there's a role at your company that I want, will you please get me an internal referral link? You're not really asking them a favor, because if you get hired, they're going to get some sort of incentive. And sometimes that's $1,000 added to their paycheck, and sometimes it's smaller. But don't be afraid to ask people to go out on a limb if you're remotely qualified for the role, because they're going to get something out of helping you too. Mutual welfare and benefit. It's beautiful. But let's say, okay, I wanted this role. I don't have 19 connections. Do you have people that you know who know people at that company? Before I found out that Home Depot drug tests, which I have a philosophical issue with, don't tell me what to do on the weekends, Home Depot. I wanted an entry-level role there. I didn't know anyone that worked in their technology department, but I knew a woman who knew me well enough to vouch for me, who knew people. Because if you use LinkedIn to cyberstalk who knows who and how well, you can put this together. And I was able to say, hey, would you mind introducing me to one of these 3 people that you were connected with, whoever you feel closest to and trust the most? Ended up having coffee, chatting more, and then me saying, whoa, no, I don't want to work there. But so looking at who knows who at the company for the role you want is a great way to start networking and get introduced to people who can help you get a role. The other way to go about this, especially if you're looking to shift drastically, so this is my favorite way if you're looking to go from a mid-level engineer doing a fairly standard dev role to I'd like a senior opportunity. I'm not getting promoted at my company. I'd like to be a little bit higher up in the echelon somewhere else. This is my favorite way. Find the role, then hunt down people who work there. But if you're like me and had to get real creative, my other favorite way is to say, who knows me the best? I love this guy, Miguel, by the way. Who knows me the best? So look through your LinkedIn, and I'm oddly protective of my LinkedIn. Those people that you have no interaction with, you don't know them, you did not meet at a meetup, they are a stranger that is just casting a wide net. I will absolutely deny. I am far more protective of my LinkedIn than my Facebook, where my pictures of my children are. Fine, just whatever, enjoy my beach photos. But your LinkedIn should be a sacred space where pretty much everyone you're connected with has had a conversation with you. They know you on some level, even if it's just we went to the same Kubernetes meetup, had a chat, I made you laugh, great, now we're connected. Cool. So look at the people that you're first connections with, and then look at their companies. And not just people who will vouch for you, but who's happy at work, right? So if I've got, a close relative that I know will vouch for me in a heartbeat, and I know that he or she will absolutely help me get a role, but every time we go out for a drink, they're saying, God, I hate my job. Probably not the place to start. Probably not a great company. Starting with people who know you, that are fairly happy with their company, with where they work, with what they're doing, and saying, hey, what's available where you are? And then you've got a guaranteed first connection, a guaranteed person who will vouch for you saying, here's an internal referral link. I'd love to take you out to dinner with my bonus. Yeah. A little bit of cyber stalking goes a long way. It's a great tactic. There's a couple other things. If you're looking at a role that's listed on LinkedIn, and I wish I had a screenshot of this. So sometimes it will tell you who posted that link. If a recruiter posted that link, spoiler alert, they know very little about the job. Probably. They've probably never done that job. They're a recruiter full-time. Reach out to them. So when I was looking to break into DevOps, I sent plenty of LinkedIn in messages saying, hey, you posted this DevOps role. I know about 20% of the things on your list. But I noticed that there's 15 people with that job title already at the company. Would your client be willing to take on an intern and save themselves some money in salary to teach me what to do? And then I would be coming in with no bad habits or preconceived notions, and I would only do what they want. You'd be surprised how many people were open to going to their clients and saying, hey, yeah, would you like to save some money? Because this chick's eager to learn, and we can definitely pay her less. It happens. I blame the phone manufacturer. So always blame them. So yeah, especially if you're looking at a role that seems perfect, but maybe your tech stack isn't strictly in line with what they're looking for. Ask. Say, hey, I've never done this particular type of development, but I've got all of these other skill sets. I've got all these other things that are great, and so clearly I've demonstrated I can learn new technologies. Would you be willing to talk to your client about interviewing me? Reaching out to a human always, always, always trumps talking to a computerized system. I do not care. I do not fear the robotic uprising because AI is never going to be able to understand sarcasm or empathy. And we have nothing to fear from the robots. Getting in front of an actual human being, whichever of these routes you take, is always the way to get the role you want. And sometimes that looks like who posted the job, let me talk to them. So we just talked about using LinkedIn to cyberstalk people and figure out who knows who and to get connected. Well, how do you get your LinkedIn to a place where you have enough connections of the right people doing the right sorts of things to really use that system? Oh my God, meetup.com. Local meetups are the way to go. So my sister is insane and is a front-end web developer. I don't understand how she does it, but she's one of those crazies that everything's pixel perfect and divs are I hate it. But it makes her happy, so good for her. So obviously we're not going to go to the same meetups. It would be a waste of her time to go to a Docker or Kubernetes meetup or even the Atlanta Java users group. Probably not her scene if she's looking to connect with the right kind of people to get her into the role she wants. And conversely, I'm probably not going to be looking for React meetups or Angular meetups or Vue meetups or, sweet Jesus, this div isn't, pixel perfect, I must die now meetups. Using meetup.com is a great way. And the pandemic kind of ruined it for a couple of years. It did. Virtual meetups are awful. I am what's called an extroverted introvert. I would rather be at home hiding under my weighted blanket with a hoodie on, eating pizza alone. but I can play the part of this Val for short periods of time. If you are at all capable of playing this role, online meetups are still viable ways to connect to human beings and get known. You will not believe the power of making someone laugh. The power of just someone associating your face with the dopamine and serotonin they released because your joke made them feel good for a moment. They are more likely to help you find the role you want. Wherever it is you'd like to be, find those meetups, find those people. And here's the best part. If you go to, for example, if you're a front ender like my sister and you go to a React meetup and you meet people who are mid-level engineers, they're going to get promoted at some point to senior. Who are they gonna want to recommend to fill their vacancy? Probably the person they met at the meetup that makes them laugh, that's cool, that's fun, that has shown integrity and seems like a really great person. Never underestimate the power of nepotism. So in Atlanta, we have Tech 404. I did not have time to look up what Jacksonville's equivalent is, but for every major city that I've ever seen, there is some sort of Slack channel that is specifically geared towards people in a specific geographic location who are in tech. And they always have job boards. They always have people looking to hire. And again, this is a great way to get your face in front of people. And instead of just being, someone that applied online, now you're in the same Slack area. You've gone to this job board. There's a human with a profile picture. Oh, can we all just use profile pictures, please? I don't understand what the little cutout head thing is all about. And I mean, my company owns Slack, and I hate it when people do that. I wish we could overrule them and just put a puppy or something. But yeah, talk to the human with an actual picture, make sure you have a picture, and start a conversation. Instead of just clicking on the link and applying for a role, ask some questions. People like to talk about themselves. It's, back, in the Stone Age, I got a psych degree, which is great because I was unemployable, but I got to pay $80,000 in student loan debt, so winning. People love to talk about themselves and their jobs and their roles and what they're passionate about. Starting out your job hunt by saying, instead of clicking this link and applying from this job board, I'm going to start a conversation and ask you, do you like working for this company? What do you like about it? How long have you worked there? Oh, that's interesting. Those sort of conversations, again, just encourage people to want to be good humans and help you and make it easier for them to do so. Going to conferences. The hallway track at conferences is my favorite track. No matter what sessions you attend, no matter what you learn from a speaker at a podium, the connections you make with other attendees. Well, so first of all, clearly you all picked the same conference. You got something in common. Something about this place appealed to you above other conferences that are happening this weekend. Make friends. It's just that simple. The community that you build going to events like this can be your greatest resource in job hunting. Because again, one of my favorite job interviews ever, I met a gentleman after a conference at the after party over a beer, where I told him things about myself that you probably wouldn't tell a potential employer, because that's who I am as a person. My middle name is Make It Weird. And so, I'm telling him about my broken immune system and how I miss half my work days being sick, things like this. Things that maybe you don't showcase at a job interview. So imagine my surprise a month later when he reaches out and says, hey, would you like to interview for a role? I'd like to hire you. What? But I made him laugh. And we had a genuine conversation where we were human beings who were vulnerable and honest. These situations, enjoy the hallway track here, because the people around you could be the gateway to your next awesome role. And then things like hackathons. I freaking love hackathons. I love any event where people get together and actually highlight their skills or lack thereof. That's my second favorite part of hackathons. I was once on a hackathon team with 6 UI designers and 2 JavaScript engineers. That was a nightmare. That was a freaking nightmare. We're talking people arguing over, one little tiny difference in color while no one's actually banging out any code. It was a special kind of hell. But as it turns out, I met so many cool people who highlighted their skill sets, and I was able to show what I could do. and ended up having a really great job interview after my first hackathon because someone spoke to me and I made them laugh. And they figured out I was a pretty nice human being who was really honest about my flaws and my strengths, and that's the way to get in front of people. So the best way to get your dream job, as far as I'm concerned, is to, one, just decide that nothing's non-negotiable until you're dead, and even then, if there's a deity, he'll negotiate. And two, as I teach my children, the answer is always no if you don't ask. There is nothing wrong with saying, hey, will you please give me an opportunity? One of my favorite job interviews ever came after, so my husband got home from work one night. I was a month out from the boot camp. I got this brilliant idea. So I spent 6 months in this boot camp. I paid them 10 grand. And then they paid me 10 grand to teach that boot camp for 6 months. And I was like, wait, so for free I get this boot camp twice? Bam, winning. But I gotten home and I was clearly a little bit intoxicated when my husband arrived home. He said, sweetheart, how many glasses of wine you had? And I said, one for each rejection email today. He's like, oh no, is your liver okay? Because he knew it was hard. It took me 3 months. Now, in the grand scheme of things, 3 months is not a long time, especially to say, hey, will you make me a DevOps internship? Because that's a hard sell. But it felt like an eternity when I was in it for 3 months. And so I was watching the news, and a certain political leader had been irate tweeting all day. And I thought, well, if he can do it, so can I. And so I drunk tweeted. And what was nice is because I'd been going to Women Who Code meetups and meeting people like me, Erica Stanley retweeted this ridiculous drunk tweet where I was like, just give me a job. Will someone just give me a job? Turns out CTO of a local Atlanta company was also inebriated tweeting, saw it, and we went through a delightful process. And the only reason I didn't work there as my first role is because the accountants didn't understand the concept of, if I save your developers 40 hours a week, that's billable. And they were a consultancy. That's it. It's the only reason I wasn't hired within like a week of my first interview. But I love this company and I'm still friends with people I met there. It was great. There are plenty of spaces in tech that are just sort of, everyone is welcome. But there are plenty of spaces in tech like Dev/Color, Latinx Code, Women Who Code, Girl Develop. It's kind of gotten a lower membership of recent years. There are geographically centered groups in tech. Anything that fits your niche, where you can meet people who will do things like just retweet, just boost the signal, as it were, for you Serenity and Firefly fans. Great places to be. And then at the end of the day, you come in like a wrecking ball. There is nothing wrong with putting yourself in front of someone and saying, look, you have a role open I am not remotely qualified for, but here's what I can do and here's why you should hire me. Lock in the eyes, make it weird. You'd be surprised how hard it is to say no to someone. I mean, I had a job interview where I was offered the role where the gentleman basically said, well, I'm not sure mommies are good employees. Now, I'm paraphrasing because if you were to ask him if he said that, he would tell his lawyers, no, I most definitely did not say that. But he did, in fact, say that. But locking it in, making it weird and saying, yeah, no, I am a mom. That's what makes me amazing. That's my superpower. Got an offer the next day. So my youngest kid is named Tyrion because that's what happens when geeks breed. But because I love Tyrion Lannister. That one scene in the first book where, Jon Snow's all gruff and cantankerous because that's who Jon Snow is as a person, and Tyrion calls him a bastard. And he gets all huffy about it because, and Tyrion says, never forget what you are, bastard, for the world will not. Wear it like armor and it can never be used to hurt you. One of the first gentlemen that I spoke to giving this talk from a boot camp had been on submarines for 7 years in the US Navy. And employers, after his boot camp, were calling that a gap in employment, to which I say, because I support our troops. That's how my first child happened. I'm way too supportive of our troops. And so, but they were calling it a gap in employment. That's not a gap in employment. That's service to your country. And And he was trying to ask me how he could play down those 7 years on a submarine to help him get his first role. And I was like, don't you dare. You put that insignia on your resume and then you make them feel like terrible, terrible Americans if they don't hire you. You shame them. That's what you do. You wear it like armor. So if there's anything, for example, when I started my first job hunt, I could have played down the 5 years as a stay-at-home parent. But instead I wore it like armor. And then no one could use it to hurt me. And I talked about, yes, I have been at home for 5 years. And let me tell you, if you want to learn conflict resolution, delegation of duties, allocation of resources for maximum benefit, be a stay-at-home parent. I figured out what skills I learned going through that crucible and highlighted them as, yes, I have been out of the workforce for 5 years. And here's why this makes me better. Whatever you feel inclined to hide from a would-be employer, figure out a way to wear it like armor. Figure out a way to put it front and center and say, yeah, this is me, and you'd be lucky to have me. It's much like dating that way. Yeah, no, I could go out to dinner with you, maybe. It's ridiculous in this day and age that there is some level of game playing that goes on with getting the right role. But I feel like playing the game to the extent of really recognizing your strengths, putting them first and foremost, getting in front of people as loudly and as effectively as possible, and just saying, I deserve this job, and here's why you would benefit from having me in this role. I don't feel like that's game playing. I feel like that's just knowing your worth and speaking up about it. And the cool part is that if you're like me and your self-esteem is not actually as high as you pretend it is, it's okay to pretend. It's okay to step back and be logical and say, yeah, I have some insecurities, but on paper, this is who I am, so I'm gonna walk this way. That's okay. Because the cool part about neuropsych is that you'll believe it eventually if you say it enough times. If you say you're good enough, your brain will just rewire to believe it. It's great. So yeah, it's short, because I leave tons of room for Q&A, because it's easy to get the right role if you're willing to be vulnerable, connect with people, own all of your strengths and weaknesses, find a way to make them marketable, and then ask for what you want and never accept no for an answer unless you really, really have to. But even then, negotiate, right? So I'm gonna open it up for Q&A. Like anyone who wants to ask questions about, shifting from one role to another, or breaking the ceiling of, I've been a mid for however long, but I'd like to be up here. Now's the time.
Do you have any tips for getting past being an introvert and trying to network with people?
Yes. Introverted child. I was 14 the year I decided that was not serving me. And it's really weird to wake up one day. The question was, do I have any tips on getting past the whole introvert thing? So not only am I kind of an introvert, I'm on the spectrum, and I struggle with all sorts of things about humaning. And at some point, you just decide to play a part. And again, it's much like the self-esteem bit I talked about. Your brain will compute as truth whatever you tell it to compute. This is why when I hear people making self-denigrating comments, I will slap their hand like I'm their mom, because no, now you're teaching your brain to say that. Stop. Acting like an extrovert at certain times is beneficial. So if that is not your natural inclination, you don't have to fake being something you're not, but you can decide, okay, for the context of this meetup, now that I'm in a room with people who could potentially help me and I want them to see who I am, I'm going to make the decision to walk up to people, shake hands, have a conversation. I'm going to pre-prepare a few questions that I can pull out of my back pocket so I don't have to think on the fly. I know what I'm going to say. And I'm going to play this version of me. And you can do it authentically. It is not my natural inclination to lock eyes with people, walk up to them and be like, hey, it's so nice to meet you. Tell me. But it's not far off from me to genuinely care about other human beings and how they're doing. And so for me, my introduction is usually, hey, how's your night going? Are you enjoying this meetup? Because that is authentic to me, right? So figure out sort of who you are and what version of you want to present, and then just decide, okay, for this hour, I'm going to time block it, and for this hour, I'm going to present this version of me, and I am going to do these things, and then go home and hide under a blanket with pizza. It's great. Weighted blanket. Yeah, it's, it's short-term discomfort for long-term satisfaction is kind of what I try to keep in the back of my head. Also, leading meetups. I will tell you this. Leading meetups is great. So again, one of my favorite job interviews when I was in the first 3 months of looking for my first role, I had gone to a Docker meetup because I thought I understood a little bit about Docker, and that's where I learned that I knew nothing. And they were looking for a speaker for the next month. And I was the only woman in the room. In fact, they asked me if I was lost when I checked in. Not an isolated incident in DevOps, it's neat. But they said, well, you're really funny. Do you want to teach next month's meetup? And I was like, yeah, shit. And so I figured out that the only way for me to present on a topic about which I knew nothing was to run a game show. I created a game show, and I had 3 of my students from the boot camp. They were each allowed to study Docker with one learning technique. One could only use LinkedIn learning videos, one could only use Docker official documentation, and one had to use Pluralsight. And then I had a game show where I didn't have the answers to any of the questions. I made the crowd debate, and that's how I learned Docker. Because as it turns out, you put a bunch of DevOps, and the guy wasn't wrong, we are weirdos. You put a bunch of DevOps people in a room and then ask, what color is this orange? You'll get 7 different answers, most of which are partially true. It's really neat. So yeah, leading meetups is a great way to make people listen to you and show off your personality and show like, hey, I'm the kind of person you want to have working with you. I'm really fun over coffee breaks. Also, I'm a competent engineer, but there's lots of those who are not fun over coffee breaks. You'd rather have me, right? Did I see a hand up?
Yeah, do you have any recommendations for advancing in jobs within your company? Like I personally found like there's a lot of great jobs in the company, but a lot of people will go outside thinking they can't move internally.
Mm-hmm. So this is one where I was raised a woman in the South where you don't brag about yourself. And that was the biggest disservice my family ever did for me. Brag about yourself. Keep a record. Literally have a book of everything you do and be able to pull that out in a moment's notice. One of my favorite methods for helping people to promote within a company is mentorship. As it turns out, so I've done judo for 26 years. The only feeling better to me than winning my own gold medals is when my students win gold medals. And I consider that an accomplishment of mine. If I taught them how to strangle the person that they just choked out on a mat, well, guess what? I played a part. Mentoring more junior talent within your company, one, shows leadership initiative and shows that you're willing to invest your time and talents in the company. But 2, keeping a record of everything great that you do and then everything great they do is a great way to leverage your role as mentor to show, look, I'm guiding the next generation. Look at me helping. Because, resource retention is a big problem in our industry. I mean, I remember when I was job hunting, and found the Salesforce role, people were like, you worked for Airbus for 3 years for your first role? I was like, yeah, I should have been born a dude in the 1930s. I got that company man mentality. 3 years is like an eternity in our industry. It's a big deal. We lose junior talent constantly, and then you look at the cost of recruiting, the cost of getting people set up with new tech, the time it takes to onboard to a new code base. That's obnoxious. Most people aren't really ramped up and useful for 3 months, depending on how big the product is. So if you can show, hey, I've been investing my time and energy into these more junior resources because I care about this company and I'm loyal, one, highlighting that you're helping with resource retention is useful, but 2, it does make people more inclined to feel loyalty in reciprocity. I think there should be a lot more loyalty in software. I'm a crazy like that, but I don't know. I feel like we should, as employees, be loyal to our companies in as much as they are loyal to us. So when I hobbled into work at 6 weeks postpartum, and was expected to write builds with no sleep, I suddenly felt a lot less loyal. It's weird. So just so we're clear, I would never say that you should be loyal to a company that doesn't take care of you. But if you're working for the kind of company where you want to move up rather than out, they probably deserve some loyalty and would appreciate that. Anyone else?
Do you have any strategies or tips on how to, not wait for management or somebody superior to move up? Just, sometimes they're not the best helpful guiding people. So, how do you do it yourself? Or obviously, like meetups like this, you talk to security.
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, you're asking, you've got the next level up from you manager who is not being promoted, and you'd like to be in that particular tier.
Just maybe like you said, the last thing, so like move up from mid, senior level or something like that. But who no one's really guiding the
Oh. So your manager's not recognizing your accomplishments and promoting you accordingly. This is, again, as awkward or uncomfortable as it might feel for some of us, this is the time to be your biggest cheerleader. This is the time, okay, so for example, I am the junior most person, I was the junior most person on my team when I started at Salesforce. Someone said we should start a newsletter initiative to share, because it's a 65,000 person company. The number of people I meet, and I'm like, oh, you work for Salesforce? I have no way of knowing you. When someone said we should do a newsletter about our team and send it out to these specific, targeted groups, I was like, I'll do that. I'll help. Because you bet your butt everything cool that I did got put in that newsletter because I needed people to see that. It is up to us to be our biggest cheerleaders, especially in the workplace, and to highlight things like, yes, I might be a mid-level engineer, but I have just done this task that would be expected of a senior or lead. And most companies, again, they want to retain resources. It's very expensive to replace us. It's time-consuming and irksome. And in the meantime, while we're gone, who's going to do the work that we were doing? So highlight your accomplishments. Find a way to put it in front of people. And sometimes that looks like in your one-on-one, just telling your manager, yes, I've just completed this list of things and I figured out this problem. And sometimes that looks like, hey, we should consider adding blank framework to our stack to increase this efficiency by X%. Sometimes it takes a little homework, but showing that you care enough about the product to want to be that sort of invested, and then doing a little bit of legwork so that you have something to say about it, and just pointing out, like, I'm a valuable resource. You really should be utilizing me at this level. Also, Daddy needs a new BMW, so. Because I'm sorry, I get sad when people forget that we work to make money. And as it turns out, if you're doing the work of a senior or lead, you should be paid commiserately. They ask a lot of us. We should ask for a lot back. Anyone else? Oh!
How do you get over, being uncomfortable presenting yourself? I feel like you say, yeah, you should do this. Yeah, that's great. All of it, I don't feel comfortable. And it's one of the reasons why I like being a developer. I'm behind the scenes, so how do you get over that?
Yeah, part of why I love DevOps is I get to hide in a server room. It's great. There's no people there. And that's the thing. There's going to be discomfort anytime you brag on yourself. Our culture in specific seems to devalue recognizing your own worth. We seem to, if you look in it's a trope in every movie, TV show where the girl with the glasses and the overalls is the ugly chick. What? First of all, no, she's not. She's gorgeous, but overalls are the thing. Whatever. But she has to realize her value. This is a trope for a reason. In our culture, we are taught to denigrate ourselves. We are taught to not value our inherent strengths and worthiness. And to that, I call major BS, because every single person in this room has talents, skills, and knowledge that no one else has. To some extent, right? It is very awkward and uncomfortable to genuinely, I hear a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, and I'm like, There's a difference between imposter syndrome and taking a really healthy look at your strengths and your weaknesses and recognizing both. That's cool. But then you have to do the scary, vulnerable thing and speak up about your strengths. It is always going to feel a little awkward in this culture. However, I think because we're not used to it as a people, when someone is comfortable not bragging, not denigrating others around them. This is why people love Lizzo. Some musical artists, while they're telling you how great they are, put down other people. The thing about Lizzo that makes her unique and perfect is that she never puts down anyone else while she's saying, I am amazing. She doesn't have to denigrate. You can identify your strengths without being, seen as a braggart, without, putting down anyone around you. It's okay to say, yeah, I'm really great at talking to people. I make people feel good when I ask them questions. It's going to feel awkward. It's one of those things like paying taxes that you just get through and do because you have to get where you want to be. And for me, the best way to make it less awkward is to practice. So before I went to my first Docker meetup, Kubernetes meetup, DevOps World, DevOps World, I practiced at home like a crazy person in the mirror some introductions I was going to make because I knew I was job hunting. I knew I wanted to break into this industry and I knew I wanted a certain kind of role. And so being a research nerd, I read a lot and then I practiced looking myself in the eye in the mirror and saying, oh, is this your first DevOps World? Oh, you came last year. What was it like then? Are you finding it better this year or worse? Like practicing some introductory statements, also practicing saying nice things about myself. I am almost 40 years old, and last year was the year that I embarked on saying nice things to myself about me. And I cannot tell you the world of difference it has made in how I carry myself, how I speak about myself, how I feel about myself. Look yourself in the eye, in the mirror, and tell you the things about you that make you incredible. One, your brain will believe it eventually, even if our culture tells you not to. And two, you will feel less awkward and less uncomfortable telling other people why they should value you. If it were up to me, we'd all have amazing self-esteem. Let me do a time check on this because I don't want to infringe on the next person. Oh, yeah, no, we're out of time. That's exciting. Any last questions before we all get some more coffee?
Yeah, you said you were an oversharer.
Yes.
How valuable do you find it to have a very sharing online presence at times? You put up your social profiles. How do you feel that maybe coincides with that introverted experience in consequence? So
for me, everything about me falls into one of two categories. Either everyone in the world can know it or literally no one, not even my husband, can know it. And that latter category is very small, but it's very dear to me. I am an oversharer because I do subscribe to this mentality that nothing I share about me can ever be used to hurt me because I shared it. You didn't find that out. So I have a compromised immune system. I've had COVID 3 times. It's hell. I'm probably going to have COVID when I get home. It's just part of going to conferences for me. Neat. Can't wait to see what time number 4 is going to be like. But I share that. Because as it turns out, a potential employer can't ever come back to me if I take a role with them and say, well, God, you're sick all the time. Yeah, buddy. And I was real vocal about that before you hired me. Sharing, things about me as a demographic. I'm a queer woman with a disability. Neat. No one can use any of those little data points to hurt me if I'm real out loud about it. If I'm just me, authentically. That is not for everyone. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with that level of sharing. I mean, hell, I did my keynote yesterday and talked about checking myself into a trauma center. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with that level of oversharing. However, no one can ever come at me with my mental health and hurt me because I'm pretty vocal about it. So this is a really personal choice. You have to decide what things about yourself need to be kept sacred and private, and what you are willing to share. I will tell you the number of times I have overshared and gotten vulnerable and had someone thank me that they felt safe to talk to me about certain things. For example, I talked in my keynote yesterday about checking myself in 2020 to a women's trauma center. And the day I checked myself out, I didn't want my husband to have to wait in the parking lot with 3 children for God knows how many hours because it moves at the speed of bureaucracy, you know. And so I said, well, I'll just lift home when I finish all the paperwork. And I got in the lift, and the woman driving said, oh, what is this place? Now, I could have said it's a hospital. I could have said, oh, it's an office park, because there's offices there. I could have said any number of things, but I just did the scary thing and said, well, actually, this is a trauma center for women with PTSD. And she started sobbing. Turns out she'd moved to Atlanta 3 weeks previous to live with her sister, who died 2 weeks previous. She knew no one and was driving Lyft 24 hours a day pretty much, not sure what to do. And so I told her about my experience and how wonderful it was and how supportive and how stabilizing to be in this center specifically for women with trauma. She turned off her Lyft app when she dropped me off at my house and drove right back and checked herself in. Did I need to share that with her? No. In fact, my mother probably wanted to crawl out of her grave and slap me for oversharing with a stranger. But it paid off for that woman, and I felt good about it. So there is no right answer on how much of yourself to share with the general public or with employers or with coworkers. Whatever your comfort level is, I'm comfortable making other people uncomfortable. If these 9 uncomfortable people dislike me, that's cool. But if that one person who needed a safe person to talk to suddenly has someone they feel safe around, for me, that's a big enough payoff. So I'm a little more in your face than I think most people are comfortable with. But I love being the person that gets reached out to and told, hey, I have a little bit more self-esteem and self-confidence because you've just told me it's okay to be me, even though your opinion shouldn't matter. It should be internally derived. So there's no right answer. Which, you know, for all the stuff that I've now shared with a room full of strangers, it's got to make you wonder what that 5% I keep private must be like. Anyone else? Well, thank y'all for coming. I hope that at some point you go to all the meetups, self-promote, use LinkedIn to lightly cyberstalk the community and get an internal referral link to your dream job and wake up every day thinking, this is a life I was born to live. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.